But let me ask you, recently 11 major mainstream Indian authors, including Arundhati Roy, went to Kashmir and came back and said we need to settle this problem. I think Arundhati Roy's words were not only we need to liberate Kashmir from India, we need to liberate India from Kashmir. And so large number of people who never spoke on this issue now are speaking. So people, the Indian intelligentsia is not fixed either. I want to sort of ask you to review your own comments earlier. It seems like there is a soul searching going on Indian side also. Even if they want to find a solution within Indian context, they know the present status quo cannot be sustained. Therefore, what are the possibilities of any other scenario that, because I think with all his flaws and faults, and given that he was so weak and vulnerable to American pressure, General Musharraf did offer a number of sort of new openings to India, which India did not seize. Given that that possibility is still maybe on the table, and yesterday what was very interesting was Zardari, he said we want bilateral talks. He did not concede as yet to Kashmiri demands of trilateral talks, very clear. So given that, how do you see things playing out?
Arundhati Roy is certainly a prominent personality and widely reported. I think her writing is very good. I don't think her reasoning is equally good. I found myself in disagreement with her on a lot of issues.
No, I'm not saying that. What I'm asking you is respectfully. I'm sure you are critical of her, but I'm saying is, will you agree that some part of Indian intelligentsia has taken standard intake? How do we account for that in the larger context? Is that going to bring an opening?
The Indian intelligentsia is a very large and diverse group of people. So there are parts of it that support almost any stand that you can name is supported by someone. So the fact that a group of authors has said this is not in itself politically significant. It changes the discussion in newspapers. She wrote a number of, in fact, a very interesting article came up in the same magazine, in Outlook magazine, where she published her article on Kashmir, rebutting her and suggesting that this is not the liberation that we're looking for. And that was...
That's K. Subramaniam, I think, article.
No, not K. Subramaniam. This was by a different author who is not prominent.
Subramaniam also wrote, but that to me shows
now
there's a lively debate.
Yeah.
Previously there was no debate, now there's a debate. How do you look at the debate?
I think we cannot get away from the fact that the Kashmiris are deeply unhappy. Overwhelming majority of them. This last movement that we've seen in Kashmir, which Arundhati Roy and others have reported on, was unlike anything I've known before since Sheikh Abdullah's time in 48-49 when he was locked up. In the sense that it was genuinely a mass movement, it was non-violent, and it united every strata of Kashmiri society, including the most opportunist politicians in Kashmir had to follow it for some time. And that is a sign that people are fed up. Now, in order to annoy the Indian government more, they raise slogans of "Long live Pakistan." I don't take that too seriously, because by and large, if you talk to Kashmiri leaders, if they say anything, they say, we don't want to be part of either of these countries. You know, if Lithuania can be independent and Latvia, why can't we be independent? They say that. So when you discuss with them further, and you say, well, what sort of independence do you want? You want your own army? You want it? Then they begin to change. No, we don't want our own army. We don't want to militarize Kashmir. We don't want anyone else's army too. So they've been unfortunate that the ISI sent in jihadis, who were hated by lots of local people, not by others, but by lots. And then the Indian army was sent in, which behaved like an army of occupation. You know, rapes, repression, violence. So we have to just move away from geopolitics for a tiny bit and say, what about the Kashmiris? Do they have no rights at all? Are their rights going to be determined by these two states? And that, I think, is the dilemma, which is why I return to what I said, that within a wider framework, you can offer the Kashmiris something. You know, the end of the line of control, and an autonomous Kashmir without its own army or anything like that, but which everyone agrees is an autonomous region within a larger union, and the same for the Tamils, which we haven't discussed, which has been a thing going on now for a long time and much more violent than anything in Kashmir, is the fight of the Tamil Tigers against the Sri Lankan government. So I think that is the direction in which we have to move. And I don't see any other way out. I don't think Pakistan and India want another war on Kashmir. I don't think the Pakistani military, even its hardline elements, want that now because they see the dangers. Kargil was quite instructive for the adventurists inside the Pakistani military. You know, they couldn't do it. And the politicians who backed them understood this fact very well. So Kashmir is not a problem that is going to be solved by force. And the Kashmiris have now understood that, so the methods they use are non-violent civil disobedience, as the way India won its independence.
Before I go ahead.
I think the future of the Kashmiris is similar to those of the Nagas, small groups in the northeast, who also are not that happy in the Indian Union, and who have also pursued armed struggle in various. I mean, public opinion changes back and forth. Nothing will change. Tibet, somewhat the same thing. Actual Tibetans, they scaled the Chinese embassy wall in Delhi. Anytime they get a chance, Chinese hold an Olympics, they make the most of it. They'll keep on doing that. That's not going to stop. Nothing will change. Okay, there's a point at which, and there are big reasons for that. Okay, we can debate whether China really should have Tibet or not, but it has it now. And as far as China is concerned, the reason for keeping it goes back to the Opium War of 1840 and all that. Very similar reasoning takes place in India, that this is a big project that the Indian people have undertaken. It's a long project. They trace the project back through long periods of Indian history. And you know, because a small group, you say Kashmiris, of course it's not Kashmiris, it's Kashmiri Muslims in the valley. It's, you know, Shia Kashmiris don't necessarily feel that way. Hindu and Buddhist Kashmiris, of course, don't feel that way. And some Kashmiri Muslims in the valley don't feel that way.
But hang on a minute, just hang on a minute. The analogy with Tibet is, I think, not totally accurate, because the Chinese government never agreed after they took Tibet that no Han people could settle in Tibet. The Indian constitution had a clause inserted by Jawaharlal Nehru saying that no non-Kashmiris could enter Kashmir and settle there. That was a reason. And the reason, if you want to go back to it, is that there was an agreement with partition, whatever we might individually think of partition, that the Muslim majority areas of India would be allowed to vote on whether they formed part of Pakistan or India. And the Kashmiris were never allowed to vote, despite being a Muslim majority part of India. It goes back to that.
You're misrepresenting the actual agreement, which was not about Muslim. The Congress Party would never have agreed to a deal on the basis of Muslim majority or not. There were elections held in 1946 in the colonial setup, and indeed in many of the Muslim majority, in most of the Muslim majority areas, the Muslim League did very well, and those parts became Pakistan. In fact, as of 1947, there was not majority support in Kashmir for the Muslim League.
No, for Sheikh Abdullah there was.
Okay,
and he demanded a referendum on whether on the Kashmiris being allowed to choose their own future, and Nehru agreed publicly to a referendum.
And in the United Nations.
I think you know, we can debate the minutiae.
But this is not the minutiae. This is the very origins of the dispute.
That doesn't matter.
You mean now that a big state exists, it can do whatever it wants?
Exactly.
America does it, we can do it too.
It's not about America. It's a good state. It's a state meant to serve the people, a large diversity of people. And in order to do that, there have to be certain rules. It's not an ideal state, it's a problematic state, but there's a purpose behind the state which is good, and which does not end in Kashmir. It goes from Kashmir to Kanyakumari. And for that, certain rules have to be kept.
Now, let me ask you then, how do you interpret Indian Prime Minister's statement he just gave yesterday at the United Nations? He said we want to settle all disputes with Pakistan, including Jammu and Kashmir. Then how do we read that statement? If there is no issue of Jammu and Kashmir, then why is saying we want to settle this?
Indian leaders have said very similar words.
But he's not just Indian leader, he's Indian Prime Minister. He speaks for the entire state.
Yeah, so Indian Prime Ministers have said that. The Simla Agreement says that. Of course, India wants to settle the agreement. The question is on what terms.